Hi folks, my name is Justin Sullivan, your friend with Jets. As many of you know, I own an integrated group of aviation services companies, including a Part 135 air carrier and a charter operation. But frankly, none is more essential to our core mission of serving our airplane owners than what we do right here in Buffalo, New York at PJM Private Jet Maintenance. I'm joined by Ben Chifo, our Director of Maintenance and General Manager. Ben and I started this company together a little over a year ago, and it's grown great bounds ever since. Ben, why don't you introduce yourself?
Good afternoon. My name is Ben Chifo, Director of Maintenance of Private Jet Maintenance. I have the privilege of working with an excellent staff here in Buffalo. We boast about a 22-year average experience level, which is really unfounded, I guess, in the industry.
And where do these people come from? I mean, so much of what we do is building a great team. And I'm really pride myself on surrounding myself with great people. But Ben takes that to a new level. When I first met Ben up here in Buffalo last year, we took a drive around the airfield through other hangars of other companies. Everybody knew Ben. Everybody was excited that Ben was here to start his own shop. But tell us a little about your history, where you were before here, and the people that you've brought along the way with you.
Sure. Actually, most of us are transplants from a local flight research company up in Niagara Falls. And before that, a couple other co-workers here are from the Rochester area. We worked at the Rochester Airfield for a number of years with JetSmart Aviation Services and with U.S. Airports. Yeah, great bunch of guys, all local Western New York talent, avionics backgrounds, extremely technical, mechanical ability people that have a ton of experience in aviation.
And you know, going back with the average tenure in the industry of 22 years, a lot of what we do, obviously, with our company is managing and maintaining classic airframes, so planes that were manufactured in the year 2000 or before. It seems to me that there's a real skill set in mastering those classic airframe systems, and those are things that frankly, the OEM service centers like Dassault Falcon Jet and Bombardier, they shy away from those older airframes because they don't have the deep bench of experience that we do.
That's very true. Newer aircraft, obviously, in my opinion, are a little easier to maintain in that they have a diagnostic system that kind of points you in the direction of where you need to go. The classic aircraft, the classic Learjets, Citations, King Airs, Falcons, they don't have that. It totally relies on the know-how and the experience of the technician working on the aircraft. We have a full complement of test equipment, ground support equipment for these aircraft that help us in guiding us to find what the problem is and what the solution would be to fix that problem.
So with our high utilization charter model, we're putting about 1,000 hours a year on an airframe. And with this Falcon 50, for example, we budget about $1,000 an hour for airframe maintenance and another $500 an hour for engine maintenance or engine reserve. So that over that 1,000 hours, that's about $1.5 million a year in maintenance monies that we're budgeting for a classic airframe like a Falcon 50 or a Lear 60. That's a lot of money. That's the single most expensive, single biggest cost point in owning an airplane. And you know, this is really, this operation, having this operation, it's my secret weapon. It's the secret weapon of the owners in our program, because we're able to help them stretch that million to 1.5 million so much further than other companies that lack this expertise and experience, and also people who are operating newer airplanes. You know, there's a lot of things that we're able to do with classic jets, like refurbished and overhauled parts and other things that are really off the table with newer airframes, maybe that are still under warranty. Can you talk to that?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. Parts is a big deal. Parts these days, a little harder to come by. We have the luxury here. We use 2 different services to source parts. So we're able to actually find the best price for that part that is on the market. Any parts that we can have repaired, we definitely take that into consideration. Sometimes it does work out better in the long run if you send it out and get it overhauled yourself, and you get that same part back repaired. Other times, time maybe is more of a factor than price, in which case you would go for an exchange part. But like I said,
and how much are we saving on these types of things compared to brand new factory OEM parts?
In some cases, tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, but percentages?
You're probably saving at least 60%.
Yeah.
I would say.
Yeah. So 60% over $1 million or $1.5 million.
Yeah, it's a considerable amount of money.
Yep.
Yeah.
And our shop rate here, we're not going to give out dollars, but we're about 40% less than Bombardier or Dassault
Absolutely.
Falcon Jet for our hourly rate.
Absolutely.
With more senior technicians.
Correct.
All right, great. So let's talk about evaluating airplanes for purchase. I'm often asked by potential owners to evaluate a Lear 60 or a Falcon 50 or a G4 or a Falcon 900, an airplane that they either have or are looking to purchase, but obviously the people who sit in the back of the plane aren't as versed in the systems. So they hire companies like ours. They bring those planes in here for an in-depth 1 to 2 week technical evaluation, test flight, and records review. Can you talk about the due diligence and research and workmanship that go into protecting one of our owners when they're evaluating a purchase?
Sure, and actually we can go as in-depth as any owner or potential owner wants us to go. We can do just a light once over, or maybe people want to have more of peace of mind. They want us to do a deep dive into the logbooks and see what's been done to the airplane, see if there's any damage that's been done to the aircraft over the years it's operated.
Well, like service bulletins.
Service bulletins.
What is a service bulletin?
A service bulletin is a document that comes out on the aircraft, and that service bulletin may be on the engine or on a component on the aircraft.
Service bulletins are very expensive, folks.
They can be. Just for an example, there is a service bulletin that is coming out on the Lear 60 for the thrust reversers. It is going to actually have an oral warning when the thrust reverser is deployed. It's going to be a mandatory service bulletin. Right now it is not. But when it comes out, it will be mandatory, and that we're going to recommend that people do that in conjunction with an inspection because it's quite detailed and on its own would be very expensive.
So every airframe can have different service bulletins that are mandated by the federal authorities or by the manufacturer. And it's that research that goes into looking at what service bulletins or airworthiness directives may be in compliance or out of compliance with a certain jet that we're evaluating.
Right. And like I say, some may be optional and they're labeled as such, but for the most part, a lot of them are mandatory. And a lot of people miss them. So in a pre-purchase inspection, we would identify if something has been missed. Like I said, we'll do a deep dive into the logbooks and check for any damage. We definitely recommend a full avionics functional check at minimum, so that you know every component, as far as the avionics goes, is functioning 100%.
How about some known problem areas for some of these classic jets and knowing what to look for?
I mean, low power communications, in which case we would take that comm unit and send it out and get it overhauled. Transponders. A lot of times people will fly around just using transponder number 1, never switching over to number 2. And we will test that, and lo and behold, many times, I would say probably 7 out of 10 times, we found that the number 2 transponder is absolutely not working, it's dead.
And so a lot of these items can cost quite a bit to fix. Service bulletins can be expensive to comply with. So that's why investing in that pre-purchase inspection is so important, right at the beginning of your ownership experience.
Absolutely. Boroscoping the engines is another one. Definitely something that we recommend be done if you're purchasing. It may have ingested debris and put nicks in blades that are not acceptable. Interior, I mean, you can have Wi-Fi systems these days, sat phones, entertainment systems. We would give a full once over on all of that equipment. Engines, hydraulics, we would jack the airplane, swing the gear, check for corrosion, big one.
Where would you find corrosion in a Falcon 50?
Wing roots. Yeah, wing root areas. We would open up and check for all of that. And in some cases, you need to bring in a DER to do some engineering to do repairs on the corrosion. Yeah.
So how do we help people stretch that 1 million to 1.5 million a little bit further, or maybe a lot further, on some of these classic airframes? When you're protecting a $30 million Challenger 350 or a $60 million Gulfstream G650ER, you've got a very high-end investment, and you're only going to maintain that with factory OEM parts. We're able to take some liberties with these classic airframes in a way that doesn't compromise the safety and integrity of the airframe, but can pass along substantial, 5-6-figure savings to our airplane owners in our fleet, just by virtue of flying fully depreciated aircraft where we're not afraid to use an overhauled or exchanged unit part. Can you maybe talk about a few examples of how we help people save money with these planes?
I would say one big one would be programs. Do you want to stay on your engine program?
Beautiful.
Do you want to stay on your avionics program, your HAP program, or your CAS program? If you're buying a classic aircraft, depending on the previous owner, they may have already put a large, substantial amount down on that program.
Yep.
Sometimes when you cancel those programs, you'll lose that reserve of funds.
Yes.
If the reserve has already been used up, then you might consider, dropping the program.
See, I think you can drop the program regardless of that. So Honeywell MSP doesn't work that way. You don't build up a residual value. If you exit the program, you lose whatever money is in there. But this plane, 3 engines, 2 midlifes, and 1 overhaul, that complete job is going to cost about $400,000, right? And that's going to give us 3 engines that have 2,100 hours on those 3 engines, right? We set aside in our model a $500 per hour engine reserve. So at that next interval when these engines are due, 2,100 hours after this, so quick math, sorry. 2,100 hours times 500 hours is $1,050,000 that owner is going to set aside in his own account. He's not going to use Honeywell.
Exactly.
He's going to set aside $1 million in engines, and for that, he's going to get through his 2,100 hours. He's going to have to do the same thing that we're doing again and spend another $500,000, but he's going to have $1,050,000 to play with.
Sure.
Compare that to using MSP. So that same 2,100 hours times $1,425 an hour, current MSP rates for 3 engines, he's going to pay $2,992,500 to another company, not going to get $1 of that, for them to do a $400,000 maintenance service job. That does not compute It computes if you're Honeywell.
Sure.
It does not compute if you're the airplane owner.
Exactly.
But if you own a $30 million Challenger 350, you don't want to take that depreciation hit on this asset. So you're not going to take it off of the Bombardier, whatever their engine program is.
Right.
Right? Because you're not going to hurt the residual value of your plane. But if you're paying $3 million for a 1991 Bird, you're going to fly it 1,000 hours a year, and you're going to save $2 million compared to MSP over your 2,100 hours. 2.5 million, because it's only going to cost you $500,000 to do the engines. What else do we want to tell them, Ben?
Well, let's talk about avionics. I mean, avionics on the classic aircraft, there is enough spare parts in the pool. Now, airplanes have been taken up, out of service. The stockpile of displays and comm radios and navigation units and FMSs, there's a bunch out there. You can really shop around and save a lot of money. Same thing, why would you want to put all that money out on an annual basis? You could potentially go 8, 10, 12 months not having to buy one piece of equipment.
Let's talk about Wi-Fi. You could buy the latest and greatest AVANCE L3 or L5 system, and they've gotten very sophisticated with how they license that system. So if you wanted to connect, say, 9 devices onto a Wi-Fi system, you'd need the L3 plus. It's going to cost you $175,000.
Easy, yes.
Right? You can do an ATG 5000, which is a second generation avionics or Wi-Fi solution made from the same manufacturer with the same bandwidth without a user limitation. So you'd have very low connectivity, but you could connect 15 devices to it if you wanted to. And that costs about $50,000 installed.
Yeah, I mean, again, there is enough now where people have upgraded to the L3 and the L5, so the pool of parts is growing.
Antennas, devices, connectors.
And if you're looking for Wi-Fi for your aircraft, you will notice no difference between an ATG 4000, ATG 5000 to an L3 or an L5.
L5, I think, is a bigger bandwidth. Like you can stream with that, so.
No, you can stream with the 5 as well. I think the advantage with the L3 and the L5 is about the movies. You can pull into an FBO, and if there are participating FBO, your aircraft, while it's sitting out on the ramp running, will download the latest movies into its server, and then you can watch those. But if you're streaming Netflix or Hulu, that kind of thing, you can get by with an ATG 4000 and 5000.
So let's talk about continuous airworthiness programs on these airframes. How does it work, and how do we fit into it?
Well, depending on the aircraft, it may be a phase inspection.
What is continuous maintenance?
Continuous maintenance is maintenance that's done at a certain flight hour interval or a time interval. And every aircraft runs on both items that come up as hours and cycles.
So that's basically where the $1,000 an hour airframe maintenance goes to, is these due list and calendar and hourly based items and discrepancies. What are discrepancies?
Discrepancies are issues with the aircraft, problems.
Things break.
Things break.
All right.
Yep.
So the continuous maintenance program, how does that work?
Continuous maintenance program based on your flight hours, what you're flying per year. Obviously, the more you fly, the quicker your maintenance event will come up. And you may have an A phase that comes every 300 hours. And obviously, if you're flying your aircraft that much, you're going to be doing it a little more often. We're going to check things like the gear, the fuel system, the engines.
So each one of these phased inspections, there's a multi-100-point checklist of items that you're required to do in order to sign it off to return it to service.
Correct. Yes. Like Dassault will have an A check, B check, C check, D check. As the letter changes, each of those inspections get a little more complicated, a little more pricey. But every A check, B check, C check, and D check on a Dassault product is a point-by-point inspection program for the amount of hours that check is due. You're going to have airframe items, you're going to have engine items that come due at each of these checks. And obviously, like we mentioned before, the more you fly the aircraft, the more often you're going to be doing these phase inspections or checks.
Like every single component on this jet is on some sort of maintenance tracking schedule, right?
Correct.
Everything on it.
Everything.
From the ashtray to the trash can to the
Yes.
fire extinguisher, the fire bottles in the engines.
Yeah, everything is part of one of those phases or checks. Yeah, it's literally a tip-to-tail maintenance event.
So what we're talking about with an ETG 5000 versus an advanced L3, does that also relate to core avionics systems like flight management systems? Can you pull in a used FMS into a plane?
You can absolutely do that. Obviously, you're going to want to get a WAAS-capable FMS. And basically, WAAS is a wide area augmentation system. It's basically a FMS that is 10 times, I would say, more accurate than your basic FMS would be. There are other options, though. You don't have to go with a universal if your aircraft is a universal aircraft. You don't have to go with a Rockwell Collins FMS 850 or a 5000. You could absolutely put in an Avidyne IFD system, and very good system. You would probably, if there's not already an approval, you'd have to go through some sort of an approval process with a DER to get that installed in your aircraft. But there are options.
And that's really a lot of what we do, right? Is helping people put more options on the table.
Find options. There's always another way to do it. You don't have to replace that part with that exact part all the time. Sometimes you do, but sometimes you don't.
And that's really where our research capabilities, researching these airframes, researching available systems.
And the knowledge base, knowing what you can do. But we definitely are sensitive to the customer and what the price point is at the end of the day.
So let's talk about safety, because we're talking about money so much, and a lot of people have this, if I'm spending less, there's a compromise on safety. That's obviously not part of our DNA, but talk to us about what we do using overhauled parts, using exchanged parts, the redundancy in these airframes, and how that affects safety.
Well, redundancy in private jet aircraft, you're at least going to have two systems. So you're always going to have a backup. Sometimes you have three. I would say any part that you purchase is going to come with an 8130. And an 8130 is a document saying that it was repaired or overhauled by a qualified facility. It's been tested, and it is documented that it passed. That piece of paper will go with the part. It comes to us with that tag, and we take that and put that into the aircraft records. It's a part of the permanent record of the aircraft. And there is no compromise in safety for an overhauled or repaired part.
Is there a compromise in cost?
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, sometimes you have to repair the part because there is another part available. Sometimes you can take that part, you could send it in and say, we want a full overhaul done of that part. That, of course, costs a little bit more money. if you know exactly what is wrong with the part, if it's a comm that has low power or a transponder that has no power output, they can fix just that part of it. And they will test it and they'll certify the part, but it may or may not have the same warranty as a fully overhauled part.
Distance, ribbon of black, stretched to the point of no turning back.
All right, so we're here with our chief mechanic, Scott Knopp. And Scott, let's talk about engines. Let's talk about Falcon 50s and Lear 55s and Lear 31As that have the TFE 731 engines. What can we do at Private Jet Maintenance to help out customers with these engines?
Pretty much just about anything. We can do a lot of troubleshooting on them. We can change fuel controls, oil pumps, various other components. We've even done some blade balancing here with the help of Standard Aero.
Yep.
We've done just about pretty much anything you need to get done on them.
And
we're able to do.
And then TFE 731s, I mean, there's quite a few of them hanging out in the pools, in the parts pools these days. How difficult is it to take an engine, say off a Lear 31A, and put it on a Falcon 50? I imagine there's a little bit of labor there and taking parts off and moving them into different locations, maybe different fuel controls, that kind of thing.
There's differences in the way the engines mount on the aircraft. Different sensors are used. Honeywell has got several service bulletins out there for modding engines of that sort. Now, whether you can take one off of a Dash 2 and make it a Dash 3, I'm not sure you can do that, but you can make the different dash numbers as there's a D, there's a B, there's 1Cs, and you can change those into the same, like a 731-3. You can modify those in that same group of engine.
So if somebody had an engine, say, that was timing out, we could definitely locate another engine, and obviously right now we're pulling an engine and we're putting on an overhauled engine. We can do that, on a 31, on a 50. We can do that on a Lear 55.
Yes, about any airframe that has a 731 engine, we're more than capable of doing engine swaps, engine changes.
Okay. And APUs?
APU swaps, changes, same thing. You got the various different APUs. Honeywell has several different models out. They've got the 100, the 150s, the 220s. So there's a lot of different engine APU models out there that we can also
Besides
change.
the Honeywell TFE 731, what other capabilities do we have here? What other engines do we have experience with?
We have experience with the Pratt & Whitneys that are on the Lear 60s. We're getting a lot more experience on those. We do maintain or help maintain quite a few Lear 60s that are in the market in the area. So we've been getting more experience on those.
Like King Airs?
King Air, which is the PT6, Pratt & Whitney PT6s. So we've got quite a bit of experience on them also. King Airs, we get a lot of experience on the King Airs, doing all various maintenance on those aircraft as well. Changing out the landing gear for landing gear overhauls. So we've got capabilities of doing quite a bit in-house.
All right, excellent. All right, a little bit earlier we were talking about our repair capabilities here at PJM, and we had talked about avionics being one of those repair capabilities. Another repair capability we do have is structural repair. So we're talking with our Chief Inspector, Brian Judah, and he's going to talk a little bit more about structural repairs and what they are and how in-depth we can get here at PJM.
At Private Jet Maintenance, we can get pretty in-depth on the repairs. Typically, most repairs we do are with engineering drawings, either issued by DER or done through manufacturers' maintenance manuals per the structural maintenance manual or structural repair manual. We can do any sort of riveting repairs, sheet metal layups, minor machinings, any kind of bends, things like that we can do in-house. The only thing we don't really do is any welding or painting.
So now that kind of repair, doing it in-house versus sending it out, would save customers quite a bit of money.
Oh, absolutely. You know, in here we're pretty well-rounded. A lot of structural repairs have more than just the structural repair aspect. You might have to pull interior apart, pull wiring out, all sorts of things. And here we can do all that in-house. You know, the electrical guys can take care of the electrical part. The sheet metal guys can do that. So you know, we're diverse enough that we can handle the whole repair in-house without having to button it back up and send it elsewhere for little bits and pieces.
Also, I'd like to talk about our mobility. We are somewhat mobile. We can do some AOG work. So basically, if somebody was stuck in the Western New York area, we could probably help them out with pretty much anything: avionics, electrical, mechanical, some metal repairs.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
within reason.
Yeah, and we can send the right person to the right job anytime we need to. You know, we can't do everything on the road, but there's quite a bit we can, at least to get them mobile enough to come here and complete any major repairs here.
Right.
But you know, sometimes it's just a matter of something needs to be MEL'd and you need to do a procedure to do that. We can definitely do that, and you know, we can just make sure we send the right people to that job.
Right. And there's absolutely, we don't compromise on safety at all at doing anything on the road.
No,
You know,
no. When I
getting-
say we're going to try to get something fixed to get you home, we're going to comply with an MEL to make it legal to fly home. You may have a item that's in op, like you may have a thrust reverser that's in op, but we can go there, we can pin it out, we can do what we need to disable it, and you know, inform the pilots of what procedures they need to follow when they fly in, and they can legally fly here for where they can do a more major repair if necessary.
So basically, they have options.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Okay.
I've been throw up the sex in her. And I can put you in. I can put you in. I've been throw up the sex in her. And I can put you in. I can put you in. I can see the whole city from this balcony. Back in 2019, I was outside freely, but now they got it out for me. I don't care what frat you was in, you can't out for me. Keep dreaming. Pineapple juice, I give a sweet.